Hello, my name is Brooklyn Taylor. My talk today is going to be how not to code, or fine, I'll just do it myself. A little bit about me. I'm a computer engineer. I've been working in hardware for about 4.5 years. I did a lot of phone support, helped set up SANs, network, all that kind of stuff. I also do professional photography, weddings, events. I try and focus on things that move, things that stand still, and some of the stuff in between. I also do professional tech writing. I build wikis. I work as a forum admin, and I do a little bit of blogging and poetry on the side. And as far as the little bit of computer experience that I have, I'll get to exactly why there's this huge wad of computer words all kind of clustered up together, which kind of goes into where the juxtaposition of my talk is about. I also consider myself a researcher rather than a mad scientist. My friends tend to lean a little heavier on one definition than the other based on the projects that I go after, but until they find out about the evil tomato that got loose, there's nothing to worry about in the short term. But coding for me is, I guess I pulled it from mainly a poetry definition. It's mainly about transferring ideas between data and people. We get really wrapped up in what we can get our computers to do and how fancy things are and how much stuff we can spend our time doing with them. And the end of the day, and the same in a lot of my hardware engineering, it's about moving and getting other people to understand it and be able to help them with it. If we can't communicate it, we can't express it, they don't understand it, it's not going to be any good to them. They're going to call back immediately or just go someplace else because they want to learn too. So I'll go ahead and get to the crux of the talk here on how not to code. Gotten pretty good at this. It's the first trick is just to listen to other people who tell you it's hard and you can't do it. You'd be surprised how often you start to come across this for people who have either tried very briefly or they're a little afraid to try, and it's a lot easier just to tell you you can't than to get proven wrong. Or the specialty of mine at that particular time was to give up. I tried this crazy language, you may or may not have heard of it, called Java. So first time installing it, I watched the great and powerful YouTube and managed to somehow frag my entire command line, deleting the file path, which underlined. Absolutely, I could actually get a picture to show up and I was very excited, and then I tried to do anything else with the computer and I couldn't. So I got really good at reinstalling operating systems really fast until I got around that. A few years later, I tried a couple of other languages, which we'll dive into a little more here in a little bit. And the next one that I continue to be very good at is to watch a lot of programming videos and competitions and all these wonderful things online. You can really get good at watching videos about programming and thinking you know how to do it until you flip on your IDE or your code editor and you're like, oh, play. Yes, I'm good at it again. So it's really about just getting in there and giving it a try. The last one, kind of a mixed bag. Sure, we can try and impress people with our ability to code, or don't. The way I kind of got into coding was mostly just to solve problems quickly. I would run into a situation and someone would say, well, you're really not qualified to do that. Okay, well, who do I talk to? Well, they're on vacation for a week. It's not a big deal, just work around it. Okay, it's been around it a little while. Do we have a solution? No. Can I? No. Okay, fine. Oh, look, it works. And nobody's usually the wiser, or you just work on a few things on your own. You bring it up to them and you're like, well, here's the thing, and it works properly. Are we okay with that? Sure, don't tell anybody. Perfect. All right. Now, a couple of tricks on actually learning how to code. The first one is to try. Download the IDE, frag your operating system, and just completely start over a few times. And that definitely leads into the make mistakes portion. Everyone's so afraid of making mistakes that they don't get anywhere, and they stick to the YouTube training video mode, and you're really a professional at that point until anyone asks you to do anything beyond turning on your computer. The big key for me was to just use the resources. Go out to the public library. They do still exist. There are books there that are free. They don't cost $50 to learn you don't like a language. That's a big one. You can also download, they have a lot of free and open training resources, databases out there. Worked in a library for 9.5 years, so it's a slight plug on my part telling other people about them, but it was the way I definitely got started. Other wonderful things like Free Code Camp, Codecademy, YouTube, in the right context and under specific guidelines, Udemy, and a few other ones are really great ways to just kind of get started, get used to the idea of coding. Build a few small projects, find out something that really frustrates you on a daily basis, and just fix it. It's amazing how good that feels after the first few times you do it. You might end up creating a lot of the problems that you have to fix later, but it's the thought that counts really at that point. And then you can put it on a resume and say, I know how to install an operating system. Why? I had to install like 20. Why 20? Well, so you get pretty good at coding in those sorts of ways. So what language should you start with? Well, I clearly made a nice, easy way to get started, and the key here is you choose one, and then your best computer is going to be the one that you actually own and is in front of you right now. So if you have a Linux computer, congratulations. If you don't know how you got it, I'm doubly impressed. But it's a really good language and a good underlying OS to get started. You start asking experts and they're like, well, okay, so you chose Python. That's a really good language, but if you really want to be good at Python, you're going to need a fancy IDE. You know the best IDE? It's clearly Emacs. Okay. What's an Emacs? Alrighty. Right. Well, that's really cumbersome. Nano and don't tell anybody. Perfect. Okay. Move from Nano, you start getting Vim, and you're like, okay, well, I've got a few of those down. Come back, see, look how impressive this is, and they kind of look at you funny. It's like, what? Well, you want to show someone you're coding? Ooh, all you're going to need to learn then is probably a little bit of HTML, a little CSS, a little bit of JavaScript. Oh, you wanted like a real website though? Go ahead and just throw in Ajax and learn the underlying operating system. Go ahead and start scripting a little bit. Then when you're configuring your firewall, running a proxy server, then you're really started coding. So that's where you start to get these gigantic cluster bubbles of information. My general recommendation at this point, pick something, get started, and one of the biggest recommendations that I can make is to find a local group. They're going to be the ones that'll help uncluster mess this gigantic bubble you've got there, kind of help point you in the right direction, and then you feel a lot more comfortable with making mistakes because you're sitting next to someone who fragged their operating system 20 plus times, learning how to install something. So it's a place to learn. It's just very nice and easy way to get started. One excellent resource actually was a talk given last week by a gentleman named Aaron Krause. I've gone ahead and thrown up a link. We'll get that link in the Slack here in a moment or two. And the Twitch stream as well. But it's a great way. He actually explains how one way to get started to avoid the big bubble, not frag your operating system, and a few other really great tips. Do we have any questions? A question?
So I saw Raspberry Pi on yours. Can you talk about some like good low-cost entry points for people that want to learn a little bit of the systems?
Raspberry Pi, I'll need to do a little extra digging to make sure that I get you the best resources, and I can definitely post those in the chat links a little bit later. One way that I got started in the Raspberry Pi stuff was actually, ironically, through a different program or a different platform called Arduino. That gave me a little bit of underlying C and C++ programming, and I was like, oh, okay. And then you start to add in, well, I would like to do this on a platform that has an OS. And so if you're wanting to learn the basics, one way to do it is to get a live CD of something like Ubuntu. The GUI is pretty similar, and you can kind of get started that way. But I'll definitely work on grabbing some other information on that one for you. Any other questions? Alrighty, thank you all so much. Feel free to chat with me afterwards or fire messages into the Twitch stream. Thank you.